Hey guys, so I'm going to go over some of the questions from the Midterm Review Packet. The first question that I'm going to go over is the first one, Part A, factor the expression completely. So what I want to do is always look for the GCF. So for this problem, the GCF is an x. So I'm going to pull the GCF on the outside, and then I'm going to divide every other term by x to see what's left over. So now I have x squared plus 2x minus 8. From here, I should notice that this is a 1 a.m. problem, so I need to figure out, can I think of two numbers that multiply to negative 8 and add up to 2? So I should see positive 4 and negative 2. Since I can do that, I'm going to bring my x down, which was the GCF, and then that inside trinomial is going to become x plus 4, x minus 2. Just a trick, you could use your calculator to help you decide if you came up with correct expression. So when I go to y equals, I want to type the original into y1 and then my equation that we came up with in y2. From here, I'm going to hit second graph, and you should notice that the y1 and the y2 columns match, which means it's equivalent. So for number 2, we're going to set up but not solve the equation. Jamie has 6 less than twice the amount of quarters than dimes. Because dimes was stated last, what I want to do is let x equal the number of dimes. Then I'm going to go back to the problem and see that it says 6 less than twice the amount of dimes. So 6 less than twice means 2 times, and dimes we just said was x. But whenever we see less than, you should notice that I put arrows above because we have to switch the order. So we're going to let 2x minus 6 equal the number of quarters. So from here, we're going to set up the equation. The total amount of money that Jamie has is equal to $3.30. That $3.30 represents money, so we need to make sure we're putting a monetary value to that amount. So instead of saying x plus 2x minus 6, which just would be related to the number of dimes and quarters we have to say that we're going to take x, which was dimes, and multiply it by how much a dime is worth. And then same thing for a quarter. If we were to solve it, we would just distribute the 0.10 to the x and the 0.25 to the 2x minus 6, and then solve for x. The next question would be number 3, and it says, state the inequality that represents the graph below. So an inequality looks like an equation which is y equals mx plus b, except instead of an equal sign, we're going to replace it with an inequality symbol. So what we need to figure out is, what is our b term, which is the y-intercept, where it crosses the y. We should see that it crosses the y at a positive 2, and our m term, which is the slope, is how much it moves from one point to another. So we have to make sure we're picking a point that we could actually read on the line. So I'm just going to use that point right there. I went up 1, so it's always change in y, over the change in x, which is over 2. So y equals 1/2 x plus 2. Now I have to look at the type of line. We should notice that this line right here is a dashed line, and dashed line means we don't put the symbol underneath. Then we should look at the type of shading. We should notice that it's shaded above the line, which means it's greater than. And again, we do not want to put the line underneath like that because it is dashed. So let's look at the next one. We need our m and our b. Our b is where it begins on the y, our y-intercept, which is 4. And then we are going to pick another point that we could actually read. So I'm going to just say 1 comma 1. So I went down 1, 2, 3, right 1. So down 3, right 1. So I'm going to write y equals mx plus b. And then again, we have to look at the type of symbol. So that's a solid line, and it's shading above. So again, above means greater than. And because it was solid, we're going to put the line underneath to represent or equals to. So for number 4, it says, is the product of radical 3 and radical 14 rational or irrational? So to the right, you could see that I typed the product, rad 3 times rad 14, into the calculator and got 6.48074, etc. So if I just copy that number and hit math, enter, enter, you should notice it does not convert to a fraction because that product is irrational. So you would write out that number that you got, that 6.4807, etc., and then your answer would be irrational because it cannot be expressed as a ratio of 2 integers, which basically means it cannot be written as a fraction. So now we're going to do the same thing for the right-hand side. 3 radical 2 times 4 radical 18, you're going to notice that you get a 72. 72 can be written as a fraction, right? 72 over 1. So your answer would be rational because it can be expressed as a ratio of 2 integers, which again basically just means written as a fraction. So for number 6, it is a literal equation, and we want to solve for z in terms of x and y. That just means it needs to be z equals and something with an x and a y in the answer. So let's look at the equation. So we need z by itself. So whenever these letters are next to each other, it's invisible multiplication sign. So the inverse of multiplication is division. So we're going to divide by 8y. So we have z squared equals x over 8y. And to get rid of that exponent of 2, we need to take the square root because the inverse of squared is square root. So we have z equals the square root of x over 8y as our final answer. Number 8 says, let g be the function g of x equals 4x minus 2 over the domain of negative 3 is less than x, which is less than or equal to 2. State the range of the function g of x as an inequality. So we need to remember that range represents our y values, which is g of x. Y equals 4x minus 2. So what I want to do is type in 4x minus 2 into y equals, and I want to pull up the table and focus in on from negative 3 to 2. So when x is negative 3 to when x is 2. When x is negative 3, we should see the y value is negative 14. And when x is 2, our y value is 6. So now that we have our two corresponding y values, we want to write them from least to greatest, so negative 14 to 6. Instead of the x in the middle, we're going to put g of x, or our y, and we want to copy the symbols that were used. So when y was negative 14, that was an x value of negative 3, so our symbol was less than. And for the 6, the corresponding x value was a 2, and we used the less than or equal to symbol. And that's our final answer. For number 10, determine which x value will make the functions f of x and g of x equal to each other. So whenever we have two equations and they state equal to each other or the same x or y value, what we want to do is create a system of equations. Remember that f of x is just like y equals, so is g of x. So when we have it in the form of y equals, we want to just take both expressions, 0.15x plus 100, and set it equal to the other, 0.35x plus 80. And then from here, we're just going to solve for x. So I'm going to subtract over 0.15x. So we have 100 equals 0.15 20x plus 80. Now I'm going to subtract over the 80 to the other side. 20 equals 0.20x. Now we need to solve for x, so I'm going to divide by 0.20 to isolate the variable. And then when I type that into the calculator, 20 divided by 0.2, we get x equals 100. If you want to check, you could always just take your value of x and substitute it into both equations and make sure that your y values are the same.